So in 2024, this past season, Terry McLaurin had 13 to set the Commanders' record all time for touchdowns in a single season. That 13 was good enough to put him in second in the NFL last season. Welcome to this episode of Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm your host, Ernie Jennings, and I'm back looking at another team from the NFC. I've been covering every team in the NFL. We've already did the entire AFC, and we started with the NFC East, covered the Philadelphia Eagles, and now we are on to the Washington Commanders. So that should be a good team to look at. Very exciting team last year. Looking forward to seeing what they do this year and how much of a challenge they give the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. So with that, let's move on to a look at the Commanders. So the Commanders finished the season with a record of 12 wins, 5 losses. At home, they were 7-2. On the road, 5 wins, 3 losses. And in the division, they were 4 wins and 2 losses. Like I said, they finished second, made the playoffs, and had a really incredible season with a rookie quarterback, rookie coach. It was a very impressive 2024 season for them. But how do the Commander players of 2024 stand up against the greatest Commander players of all time, as well as to the players from the rest of the NFL? Well, that's what we're going to find out right now on this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So we'll begin, as usual, with the coaches. The winningest coach for the Washington Redskins was Joe Gibbs, who from 1981 to 2007 had 154 wins. Quite a great coach. Went to the playoffs 24 times, won 17 of those games, won 3 championships. Very impressive. There's a big drop down to the next coach, which was George Allen. He had 67 wins from 1971 to 1977. So Dan Quinn, who has 12 victories in his first season as the head coach of the Commanders, doesn't have that many years. Give him 6 years or so, he could pass George Allen for second. It will be quite a while before he reaches Joe Gibbs if he hangs around that long. 154 victories covering a period of 26 years would take a little while for Dan Quinn. So we'll see how Dan Quinn does, but he's had a good start. So moving off the coaches and looking at the passing leaders. Real quick, I'll bring that up, look at it. When we're looking at the passing leaders, as far as yards go, Joe Theismann has 25,206 yards. He did that from 1974 to 1985. Right before him, the 10 years prior, Sonny Jurgensen from 1964 to 1974 had 22,585. So only a difference of less than 3,000 yards. So what's incredible about this is that the Redskins, in one form or another, I should say the Commanders, that was their previous name, the Redskins, one of their previous names, have been around since the 30s. They're one of the early teams in the league. And their top quarterback has 25,000 plus yards. Not very many. By the way, Sammy Baugh is third. He was 1937 to 1952 with 21,886. The first player who comes in fourth that's from the 21st century was Kirk Cousins from 2012 to 2017 with 16,206 yards. So he's the closest one. So you have Jaden Daniels in his first year with 3,568 yards. So he really has a chance to move up the list. I mean, give him a few years, do his rookie contract, 5 years at basically 3,500 yards. He'll be all the way up to fourth easily. And then which is, as a Commanders fan, I'm sure you're hoping that he signs that second contract, give him another 5 years, and he'll be the number one all-time Washington Commanders, as far as yards go, passing leader. So he's got a good start, and he seems like somebody that's going to have a great career, and hopefully he doesn't get hurt, and he can have a long career with the Commanders. At least that's, if you're a Commanders fan, that's what you're hoping. He's a very exciting player, so why not? When it comes to touchdowns, Sammy Baugh is number one with 187 touchdown passes. Sonny Jurgensen second with 179. So not too bad numbers. It's a long road for Jaden Daniels. He had 25, which puts him at 19th all time. So he'll be working on moving up the list. It's going to take a few years to top the top five because there's 5 Commander quarterbacks with at least 100. So it'll be a while as far as that category goes. When it comes to interceptions, again, Sammy Baugh had 203 interceptions that he threw. 187 touchdowns, 203 interceptions. But again, this is back in a time very different as far as quarterbacks and who they were trying to throw against, how the defense could play and some of the things that defense players could do to stop a pass. So quite a bit of difference. But he has 203, which is by far the leading interception leaders. Joe Theismann had 138. So this is a record where I'm sure you will never see Jaden Daniels reach. I mean, he had 9 interceptions last season. So say he played 20 years, that only put him at 180 interceptions, which is a lot, but over a 20-year period if he plays that long. So he's never going to reach that category. The last one we're looking at for the quarterbacks is sacks. Joe Theismann had 340 times he was sacked, and he had one of the worst, the most well-known sack in history. It just demolished his leg. It was one of the nastiest one you've ever seen if you ever go and look at it. Just terrible. But he, by far, is the leader with 340 sacks. Now, with Jaden Daniels being a running quarterback, has a chance at some point to catch this record. In his first season, he was sacked already 47 times. That's a little too many. You do not want to be sacked at that rate. In fact, Joe Theismann is sacked at an 8.6% rate. Jaden Daniels is sacked at an 8.9% rate. So you can see that he needs to slow that pace down. Maybe this next season, a little bit better grasp of the offense and a little less running around, and maybe see some fewer sacks. But those are your top quarterbacks, and you can see a lot of them from the past, and not numbers that are outlandish. So something that Jaden Daniels can definitely look at beating over his career. When it comes to running backs, again, an old-time player, John Riggins, from 1976 to 1985, had 7,472 yards rushing. Clinton Portis was second from 2004 to 2010. He had 6,824. So those are your top 2 players, and really there's nobody currently moving too far quickly up this list. I mean, you got Brian Robinson, but he's been with the team since 2022, and he's only got 2,329 yards, which is good enough for 15th. But I don't know that he's the player you're looking for long term to be the primary running back. But that's who you have currently with the Commanders. We'll see how he does. But right now, he's moving slowly up this list. When it comes to rushing touchdowns, again, John Riggins had 79. that's a good number of rushing touchdowns to have. Not a bad number. Doesn't quite make the all-time number list of. There's 5 players that had 110 or more, but not too bad. Now, this is a record, though Jaden Daniels is not a running back. This is a possible record he could break at some point. As far as rushing goes, we'll see if he has some rushing touchdowns. Like a lot of these running quarterbacks definitely have some rushing touchdowns. So he had 6 last year, so not bad for his first season. So at that pace, it would take him, 13 years, but not impossible. So anyway, John Riggins is number 1, and he has a big lead over anybody else. Clinton Portis, second with 46. So there's really nobody even close to the number. Brian Robinson, again, he's 19th, but he has 15 over a 3-year period. So he's averaging 5 a year. But as I said, I don't see him as necessarily the long-term solution to the Commanders' running game. But new coach, new outlook, maybe he would be. So that's your running backs. And again, we're talking somebody from the past where this team's been around a long time. Now, when look at the receivers and the career leaders there, one player definitely stands out, and that's Art Monk. 1980 to 1993, had 12,026 yards receiving. Quite a bit of distance between him and the second place receiver for the Commanders. 12,026 is one of the better numbers. Not quite good enough to make the top 12, but still a good number. Charlie Taylor from 1964 to 1977 was second with 9,110. So those are your top 2. Terry McLaurin's already number 6 since he's been with the team since 2019. He has 6,379. So, well, he'd have to have almost 1,500 yards, about 1,500 yards to move to 4th. But he'll definitely pass Bobby Mitchell, who's in 5th. He only needs 113 yards to catch him. So he could do that in one game. But Santana Moss is going to be a little bit difficult. When you get to the top 4 players, they jump from 7, 8, 9,000 to 12,000. So Terry McLaurin will definitely move into 5th. That is, if he can get the contract situation straightened out, which I'm sure they will. He really is a great wide receiver, and he's been a great player playing with terrible quarterbacks. And now that he has a really good one, it'd be nice to see that duo play for several years into the future and just see how well they will do together. Now, when it comes to receptions, Art Monk again had 888 receptions to lead the team. Charlie Taylor had 649. Those are your top 2. And again, Terry McLaurin's 5th. He has 460 receptions. So not that he would necessarily have 100 receptions this season, but if he did, he could move quite a bit up the list. He had 82 last season, so even with 82, he's going to almost move into 4th place. Gary Clark from 1985 to 1992 has 549, and Terry McLaurin has 460. So that's probably the only guy he can catch. If he doesn't catch him this season, he'll definitely catch Gary Clark and Santana Moss, who Santana Moss has 581 to move into 3rd place, and then it'll be another year for for Taylor, and Art Monk will be a little ways off down the road for Terry McLaurin if he can stay with the Commanders, if they can work out this contract situation and get him to be there long term. So we'll see. But he is a really good wide receiver. When we're looking at the touchdown leaders, Charlie Taylor now, instead of Art Monk, is number 1. Charlie Taylor had 79 touchdown receptions. to lead the Commanders in that category. Not a bad number. Art Monk was second with 65. And again, when we're looking down, Terry McLaurin, now this is where he's a little farther down the list. He's 8th all time with 38. He needs 9 to catch Santana Moss for 7th place. So we'll see if that happens. He definitely could do it. He had 13 last season, to second in the NFL last season in touchdown receptions. So with 13, he'd actually move up into 6th place. So we'll be watching that and tracking that this coming year in the new season that's coming up. Can't wait to really watch. I've always liked McLaurin and always wished he could have a good quarterback, and now he has him. And Jaden Daniels is so fun to watch. So they'll be an exciting couple of players to watch this next season. All right, when we're looking at the defense all time, as far as we'll start with interceptions. Darrell Green, which, believe it or not, is one of the rarities to have a player who, even though it was brief, played in the 21st century. But Darrell Green played from 1983 to 2002. He had 54 interceptions. That's a real good number. Second was Brig Owens from 1966 to 1977. Drops all the way down to 35 interceptions. So Darrell Green was really close to making the top 10, but just not quite. He needed to get to 62 at least to make the top 10. But really was a great player. I remember him as being one of the fastest players in the NFL for years at the time. Sammy Baugh, by the way, who was on the quarterback list, is also number 3 in the interception list for the Washington Commanders. He had 31 interceptions. That was back when he was a two-way player. Actually, he was also a kicker. But he played from 1937 to 1952 for at the time, Washington Redskins. Impressive player. Now, like I said, and I always say this when it comes to interceptions, you just don't see players today that can make this list. It's just so hard for the interceptions anymore. And in fact, there's really nobody currently on the team in the top 100. So it's going to be a while before you see somebody. Derek Forrest had 4. But he's been on the team for 3 years, and he's got 4 interceptions. So I don't see anybody. You got to be an outstanding player to top this particular category. Now, it's different when you're talking about tackles for loss. They haven't kept this record for so long. So you do see everybody is from this century. But Ryan Kerrigan from 2011 to 2020 had 119 tackles for loss to lead the team all time. And he leads it by quite a bit. Jonathan Allen, 2017 to 2024, has 60. So really, I don't see him getting enough to get to that total that Ryan Kerrigan has set. Let me see. Yeah. What was I saying? Jonathan Allen. Well, he's not going to do it because he's not even on the team anymore. So looking at Darren Payne also, he had 58. He's still on the team. He'll pass Jonathan Allen to move into second, but he's only halfway to catching Ryan Kerrigan. So that's a long ways off. Those are your top 2, and by a long shot. Then the last category all time we're going to look at is sacks. Dexter Manley is quite a defender. From 1981 to 1989, had 97 sacks. And then Ryan Kerrigan again, he had 95.5. Those are your top 2 as far as sacks go all time for the team. And again, Jonathan Allen was the closest one in 10th, but he's not on the team anymore. So looking at other players to fill in the gap for him, and there really isn't. Darren Payne, again, he'll be the next. He's 17th currently with 34, so he's only a third of the way to the top. He can move up this list a little bit. Even with 6 sacks, he'd move up into top 15. So we'll see how he does. But those are your career leaders for the Washington Commanders. Now let's look at the single season records. Let's see how some of the players did in those categories. We'll start with the quarterbacks again. Now here's where Kirk Cousins does stand out. He has a top 2, as far as yards go, top 2 spots. But in 2015, Kirk Cousins threw for 4,166 yards to break Jay Schroeder's record, which Jay Schroeder had set in 1986. But then the very next year, in 2016, Kirk Cousins demolished his own record by 800 yards almost when he threw for 4,917 yards, which is quite a there's only been 15 times where a quarterback in the entire history of the NFL has thrown for 5,000 yards. So Kirk Cousins almost made that list. But very impressive. But when we're looking at this past season for the team, Jaden Daniels in his very first season comes in at number 12 for the team with his 3,568 yards, tying Joe Theismann, who had had the same amount in 1981. So those are your top numbers. And last season in 2024, it was Joe Burrow. If you've been listening to these, you'll hear his name every time. But he had 4,918 yards to lead the NFL. Jaden Daniels came in at 16th in the NFL in 2024. So really a good season for Jaden Daniels when it comes to his first season passing the football. Touchdowns, Sonny Jurgensen holds the record all the way back in 1967. He threw 31 touchdowns in a single season. So even though Kirk Cousins threw for all those yards, he didn't even get close. Well, he did get 29 touchdowns in 2015, but that's it. Really, you would have thought he had a better amount than that. The year he threw for all those yards, 4,900 yards plus, he only threw 25 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels last season threw for 25 touchdowns on 1,400 less yards. So pretty impressive season for Jaden Daniels. So that tied Jaden Daniels for 7th with Kirk Cousins all time on the list. This is definitely a stat that, if you're watching Jaden Daniels, I think he can definitely break it. He's already, in his first season, was only 6 away. So that'll be a fun category to watch and see how he does. But with his 25 touchdowns last season, again, it was Joe Burrow had 43, and Jaden Daniels came in 10th with his 25 touchdowns. So not too bad this past season. Looking at interceptions all time, and again, this is something you'll never see Jaden Daniels break, but Norm Snead in 1963 had 27 interceptions in a single season. That's in 14 games. He had 27 interceptions and 13 touchdowns. So you prefer normally at least to be 2-1 the other way, touchdowns, interceptions, and 3-1 is really what you want to see for the better quarterbacks, at least 3-1. As far as Jaden Daniels last season, not bad at all. He ended up with he only had 9 interceptions, which tied him for 19th in the NFL. So this is a category where you want to be on the bottom half of the league. So not bad at all. He only had 9, so 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, almost a 3-1 ratio. And when you think about his first season, and You can just imagine when he really understands the defenses of other teams even better than he currently does, how much he'll improve. But Baker Mayfield for Tampa and Kirk Cousins, again, playing now at this point for Atlanta, both threw for 16 interceptions. Kirk Cousins ended up getting benched, but Kirk Cousins has been moved around a little bit. So here he is having the all-time record for most passing yards and then leading another team in interceptions later. As far as being sacked, Sam Howell was sacked the most times as far as the Commanders go, and that was in 2023. He was sacked 65 times, which is good enough to put him fifth all-time in a single season in the NFL with his 65. David Carr holds the record in 2002. He was sacked 76 times. That's got to hurt. Then when we come to this last season, unlike the other rookie celeb, Caleb Williams, instead of being sacked 47 times like Jaden Daniels was, he was sacked 68 times. So 21 more times Caleb Williams was sacked than Jaden Daniels was. It was a very rough season for Caleb Williams. What a difference, these two rookies coming out, and Caleb Williams got so much hype, but Jaden Daniels really came on strong as the best quarterback last year as far as rookies go. So those are your top quarterbacks in this past season. Let's look at the running backs. In single season, Alfred Morris in 2012 rushed for 1,613 yards. He had broke the record that Clinton Portis set in 2005 when he rushed for 1,516 yards. So he broke it by just under 100 yards. But those are your top all-time top running back records. Now last year, and this is something you don't really, I mean, it's great. Jaden Daniels was the number one running back for the Commanders. Sorry about that. For the Commanders, he had 891 yards rushing. Brian Robinson, the running back for the team, number one running back, had 799 yards. So those are your top two as far as that goes. So really, I mean, it's great that you have a quarterback that can do that. I'm not sure you always want your quarterback to be leading your team in rushing. But last season it was Saquon Barkley, as far as the entire NFL, who led the league with 2,005 yards to lead the NFL. Then you have, as I said, Jaden Daniels finished 23rd in the NFL with his 891 yards. So he was not too bad. Brian Robinson ended up 27th. I mean, it's not a bad duo if you want to put it like that, but we'll see how this situation works itself out this next year and who ends up being the leading rusher for the Commanders. Now, when it comes to touchdowns, John Riggins in 1983 had 24 touchdowns in a single season. That's an incredible total. That's really impressive. In fact, that put him fifth all time with his 24 touchdowns in a single season. And also, you had Terry Allen in 1996 had 21, which is good enough for tied for sixth spot. So 2 times you have some really incredible running backs. What's interesting about this is you have 4 different players in the top 4 spots. I mean, you got John Riggins in 1983 with 24, Terry Allen in 1996 with 21, George Rogers in 1986 with 18, and then Stephen Davis in 1999 with 17. And then you finally have somebody different with John Riggins again. I mean, somebody that shows up again, that's John Riggins in 1984 with 14. So quite a variety of running backs on this list over the course of the Commanders' history. But again, Alfred Morris in 2012 is the closest anybody from this current century has gotten. He had 13. Now, when you're looking at this past season, as far as rushing touchdowns, Brian Robinson did have 8. So that's not too bad. And then Jaden Daniels had 6. Those are your top 2. In the NFL, Derrick Henry for Baltimore, Jamar Gibbs for Detroit, and James Cook for Buffalo all had 16 touchdowns to lead the NFL. And then Brian Robinson was tied for 15th with his 8. So there were 13 players that had at least 10 touchdowns last season. All right, let's look at the wide receivers. See who leads the Commanders in that category. Pierre Garçon in 2013 had 113 receptions. Art Monk in 1984 had 106 receptions. Those are the only 2 players, the only 2 times that a receiver had 100 or more receptions for the Commanders, for the Washington team as a whole. That's incredible. I mean, it's frankly somewhat shocking that there's only 2 times that somebody had 100 receptions. This past season, Terry McLaurin had 82 to finish 12th all-time on the list. He's also got the 6th spot with 87. So 87 is the closest Terry McLaurin has come to hitting the 100 reception category. Honestly, I think he can hit it this year. I know they run a lot, but still, you would think it would be a possibility for Terry McLaurin to hit that 100 reception mark. And I say it's incredible when you have 2 in the entire history of the Washington team to have 100 receptions, when this past season you had 10 players had 100 or more receptions just in this past season, led by Jamar Chase, who had 127 to lead the NFL in that category. Terry McLaurin ended up tied for 19th with his 82. So quite a ways down the list. There was quite a few receivers had more receptions. And frankly, I don't think half of them are as good as McLaurin, but they just had the more opportunity, which leads to more receptions. But you put McLaurin in one of their situations and it'd be interesting to see how many receptions he'd have. When it comes to yards in a single season, Santana Moss in 2005 had 1,483 yards. That's the most ever by a Washington player. He had broke the record that was set by Bobby Mitchell way back in 1963. So it was a record that stood for 42 years before he broke it. Bobby Mitchell had 1,436 yards. So he was able to beat him by, 47 yards. Not too much, but he did catch him. It took him 2 extra games to do it, but he did pass him. Yeah. So, but that's football. Currently, Terry McLaurin, as far as active players, in 2022, he had 1,191 yards receiving. That's the most. This past season, McLaurin had 1,096. So he did have another 1,000-yard season, but that really doesn't put him anywhere too high on the list. 24th as far as the Washington Commanders go all time. This past season, again, it was Jamar Chase who led the NFL with 1,708 yards. And then Terry McLaurin was 15th in the NFL as far as that category. Now, when we're looking at touchdowns, this is where Terry McLaurin just set the record. Ricky Sanders in 1988 for the Washington team had 12 touchdowns. In fact, there were 4 players with 12 touchdowns. The most recent was in 1988. This is a record that had first been set in 1952. So in 2024, this past season, Terry McLaurin had 13 to set the Commanders' record all time for touchdowns in a single season. That 13 was good enough to put him in second in the NFL last season. Only Jamar Chase had more with 17. So that is impressive to see him on the touchdown end of so many of his passes. So out of 82 receptions, he had 13 were for touchdowns, and you like to see that. That's really a good thing to see. Now, when we're looking at the defense, and we're looking first at the interception leaders. Dan Sandifer in 1948 had 13 interceptions. Paul Krause in 1964 had 12. And here's Sammy Baugh again. In 1943, he had 11 interceptions in a single season. That Sammy Baugh was some kind of incredible player. It's really fascinating to see these players from the past in all the different categories that they were in when they're a great player, and how often they were not just in one category like quarterback, they were just everywhere. In the NFL, if I can bring it up here, it's really frustrating on this. Well, let me look at the team. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get these numbers all lined up here. But for the Commanders, Mike Sainristil, if I said that right, I hope I did. He had 2 interceptions to lead the team. And then you had another 6 players who had 1. That's it as far as interceptions go. So 2 was the number. And then if I can get this just right. All right. I'm just getting my computer to cooperate, and I'll have this. So Kirby Joseph had 9, which I think is pretty good, and he's playing for Detroit. And Xavier McKinney for Green Bay had 8. Those are your top 2. Those are some good numbers, and we'll see what they do next year as far as numbers go. But this is an area where, as far as interceptions go, Washington could use a little help. Now, when it comes to tackles for loss, I should tell you on the interceptions, going back to that total of 13 by Dan Sandifer in 1948 is good enough to tie him for second. There were several players who had 13. There was 3 of them, including Lester Hayes from 1980. The other 2 were from 1948 and 1950, who had 13. And then the same goes with Paul Krause with his 12, good enough to tie for 5th with 12. So those are your top players as far as that goes. So some impressive players. Now, when we're talking tackles for loss, Cornelius Griffin in 2004 had 21 tackles for loss. That's the most by a Washington player. Andre Carter in 2009 had 19 tackles for loss. Those are your top 2 players in that category. When you're comparing that to some of the players this past season, Dante Fowler had 14 tackles for loss. And Frank Levu had 12. Those are your top two players in that category of tackles for loss. When you compare that to this past season, Myles Garrett had 22 for Cleveland to lead the NFL in that category. And with Dante Fowler coming in at 14th, he was quite a ways down the list at number 16. So a little ways down that list. And then we're looking at the final category of sacks. All time. And this is Ryan Kerrigan again. He holds the top three spots as far as sacks go. So he was quite a player in his career with the team. Let's see. In 2014, he had his best total with 13.5 sacks. And then in 2017 and 2018, he had 13 sacks. So really very consistent when it comes to that. This past season, Dante Fowler led the team with 10.5 sacks. So that's not too bad. Double digits, you always like to see double-digit sacks. He's the only player that was able to do that for the team. Frank Lavue, again, had 8. Those are your top two, by quite a distance, really. But in the entire NFL, Trey Hendrickson for Cincinnati had 17.5 to lead the NFL. And Dante Fowler, with his 10.5, was able to come in at 12th. So decent, but the defense, I think, needs some help. Fortunately for the Washington Commanders, they were able to score enough to beat a lot of teams. But it is a category where they do need some help. That would definitely help out the team as a whole, take that next step and into their effort to make it to the Super Bowl. So that is a wrap for the Washington Commanders. Jaden Daniels, very impressive player, and with the new coach, Dan Quinn, they have re-energized the Commanders. They're fun to watch, and it'll be great to look forward to watching them in 2025 to see if they can continue their momentum or if they have the infamous sophomore slump that sometimes happens to quarterbacks. It kind of happened to C.J. Stroud. He had a great rookie season, then not so swift second season. So we'll see what happens with Jaden Daniels. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, who finished third in the NFC East. And stick around as I continue through the NFC so that you can hear about the greatest players of your favorite team. And if you're interested in the AFC, just go back to my previous podcasts. I've covered the entire AFC, and you can listen to those. You can get a hold of me, Facebook, X, or Instagram at Just the Stats NFL. Appreciate it if you would like this podcast and subscribe. That helps me grow it, and I appreciate that. And so that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So until next time, I'm out.